What if I told you that some of Africa's most mysterious birds are disappearing so quietly that most people don't even know they're gone? Picture this. Deep in an African wetland, a small brown bird with long toes steps delicately through the reeds. It makes almost no sound as it moves through the water. This is the African rail, a master of camouflage and secrecy. For centuries, these birds thrived in the continent's vast wetland systems, from the Okavango Delta to the Sud swamps. But today, something strange is happening. The rails are vanishing, and the silence they leave behind tells a disturbing story about the health of Africa's water worlds. The truth is, we're losing Africa's wetlands at a rate that would shock most people. And with them, we're losing entire communities of species that depend on these unique environments. The African rail isn't just another bird. It's a living barometer for the health of freshwater ecosystems across the continent. To understand why these birds are disappearing, we first need to appreciate how perfectly adapted they are to their wetland homes. African rails have evolved over millions of years to become wetland specialists. Their long toes allow them to walk on floating vegetation without sinking. Their slender bodies can slip through the densest reed beds. Their muted brown and black plumage makes them nearly invisible in the dappled light of marsh vegetation. They're so well hidden that even experienced birdwatchers might spend days in perfect habitat and never see one, but their secretive nature has become their greatest vulnerability. Because when their habitats begin to change, nobody notices until it's almost too late. The decline began slowly at first. Small wetlands were drained for agriculture. Rivers were dammed for hydroelectric power. Cities expanded into floodplains. Each loss seemed insignificant on its own, but together they created a perfect storm for wetland species. The rails, being territorial and poor flyers, couldn't easily move to new areas when their homes disappeared. They were trapped in shrinking islands of habitat. By the 1990s, conservationists started noticing something alarming. In places where rails had been common just decades earlier, they were becoming increasingly rare. The problem wasn't just the loss of wetland area, it was the fragmentation. Remaining wetlands became isolated from each other, creating population islands where rails could no longer mix and breed with neighboring groups. Genetic diversity began to decline, making the birds more vulnerable to disease and environmental changes. But the real crisis came from an unexpected direction: climate change. As rainfall patterns shifted across Africa, some wetlands received less water while others flooded unpredictably. The rails' carefully timed breeding cycles, synchronized with seasonal water levels, became mismatched with their environment. Nests were flooded or left high and dry. Chicks starved because the insect populations they depended on emerged at the wrong times. Meanwhile, human pressures continued to intensify. The conversion of wetlands to rice paddies seemed like it might offer alternative habitat at first, but the constant disturbance and pesticide use made these areas death traps for rail chicks. Pollution from agricultural runoff and urban waste poisoned the water systems. Invasive plant species choked out native vegetation, changing the structure of the marshlands that rails depended on for cover and nesting. The most heartbreaking part is that for years, nobody realized how quickly the situation was deteriorating. Rails are so difficult to survey that population declines of 50% or more could occur before scientists even noticed. By the time conservation alarms were sounded, Some local populations had already vanished completely. But here's where the story takes a hopeful turn. In the early 2000s, a new generation of conservationists began using technology to uncover what was really happening. They deployed automated sound recorders that could detect rail calls throughout the night. They used satellite imagery to track wetland changes in near real time. For the first time, they could see the full scale of the problem, and it was both worse and more solvable than anyone had imagined. The data revealed that while many wetlands were indeed disappearing, others were simply changing in ways that made them temporarily unsuitable for rails. Some areas that had been written off as lost could actually be restored with relatively simple interventions. The key was understanding the rail's specific needs. They required a mix of open water and dense vegetation, stable water levels during breeding season, and connectivity between wetland patches. Conservation groups began working with local communities to create rail-friendly landscapes. In Zambia, farmers agreed to maintain natural vegetation buffers around their fields. In Kenya, communities built small earth dams to stabilize water levels in seasonal wetlands. In South Africa, conservationists created artificial nesting platforms that kept rail eggs safe from flooding. The results have been astonishing. In several key sites, rail populations have not just stabilized, they've begun to recover. The birds proved more resilient than anyone had hoped. When given even partially suitable habitat, they quickly recolonized areas they hadn't occupied for decades. What's emerging is a new understanding of conservation, one that recognizes that we don't need to choose between human development and wildlife survival. Smart planning can accommodate both. Wetlands that are managed for rails also provide crucial services for people. They filter water, control floods, and support fisheries. Protecting rails means protecting the ecosystems that millions of Africans depend on for their livelihoods. The African rail story teaches us something profound about conservation in the modern world. It shows us that even the most specialized species can adapt if we give them half a chance. It reminds us that sometimes the most important conservation work happens in the places nobody sees, in the quiet marshes and forgotten wetlands. And it proves that recovery is possible, even when all seems lost. The next time you see a wetland, whether in Africa or anywhere else in the world, remember the secret lives unfolding within it. Remember the rails stepping silently through the reeds, the invisible threads connecting them to the health of entire ecosystems. Their survival isn't just about saving a single species, it's about preserving the intricate web of life that sustains us all. What other little-known species do you think deserve more attention? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Rare Species to discover more stories of wildlife fighting back against the odds.